Tonight, federal agents have exposed a money laundering empire connecting Minnesota fraud to Venezuelan cartels. Billions in stolen assets recovered.
3:47 a.m. Wayzata, Minnesota. In the early pre-dawn hours of a deep winter morning, a quiet lakeside area in Minnesota lay frozen under heavy frost, its silence unbroken as snow settled along the shoreline and large homes stood dark against the cold. At precisely this moment, a coordinated federal operation, planned quietly over many months, moved into action as multiple investigative agencies arrived at a large estate held under a corporate ownership structure registered outside the state. The individual associated with the property was widely known as a successful business owner, community organizer, and philanthropist, but investigators believed the location held critical evidence tied to a complex financial case. What followed was not a dramatic confrontation but a methodical search conducted under legal authorization, revealing carefully concealed financial records, secured storage spaces, and digital assets that suggested a sophisticated system designed to move funds through layers of organizations, currencies, and jurisdictions. Analysts later explained that the investigation began with a single irregular transaction that connected public assistance funding to overseas accounts linked to sanctioned commercial entities, triggering a broader forensic review of nonprofit operations, financial service businesses, and international trade relationships. As data accumulated, patterns emerged showing how legitimate-seeming organizations could be exploited to redirect funds intended for social programs into elaborate laundering channels involving shell companies, offshore accounts, commodity exchanges, and digital currencies. Investigators emphasized that the case illustrated systemic vulnerabilities rather than isolated misconduct, showing how modern financial crime often relies on complexity, scale, and opacity rather than force or violence. Parallel searches at warehouses, offices, and properties in multiple states revealed shipping records, accounting ledgers, encrypted communications, and transaction histories that suggested coordination across industries, including logistics, commodities, and digital finance. Authorities described the operation as one of the most intricate financial investigations of its kind, involving years of activity and billions in cumulative transactions that crossed national borders and regulatory frameworks. As news of the operation spread, public reaction reflected the difficulty of reconciling trust in community institutions with the reality that misuse of systems can occur when oversight fails. Officials were careful to clarify that enforcement actions were focused on financial conduct and evidence, not on communities, identities, or beliefs, and stressed the importance of protecting civil liberties while addressing large-scale fraud. Subsequent disclosures outlined how funds diverted from assistance programs had contributed to service disruptions, budget shortfalls, and long-term harm to people who depended on those resources, underscoring the real-world consequences of financial exploitation even when it occurs quietly behind paperwork and digital screens. Legal proceedings moved forward slowly, as complex cases often do, with investigators continuing to trace remaining assets, identify additional participants, and work with international partners to recover funds where possible. Throughout the process, officials acknowledged that justice in such cases is incremental, shaped by evidence, due process, and sustained attention rather than immediate resolution. By the end of the investigation's initial phase, the frozen estate overlooking the lake stood sealed and silent, a physical reminder of how trust, once broken, leaves lasting effects not only on institutions but also on the communities they are meant to serve, and how accountability depends on vigilance, transparency, and the willingness to examine systems honestly when failures are exposed. In the frozen stillness of a January night in Minnesota, a quiet lakeside neighborhood rested beneath pale streetlights and untouched snow, offering no hint that a carefully coordinated investigation was about to unfold. Long before sunrise, authorized teams from multiple agencies arrived without spectacle, moving deliberately toward a large residence held under layered corporate ownership and maintained with meticulous discretion. The individual associated with the property was publicly regarded as a successful entrepreneur, civic donor, and organizer, yet investigators believed the site contained records essential to understanding a sprawling financial scheme built not on violence, but on complexity, access, and trust. Entry was calm and lawful, followed by a systematic examination of secured rooms, climate-controlled storage, digital devices, and documentation preserved across multiple formats. Analysts later explained that the case began months earlier with a single irregular transaction that connected public assistance funding to distant accounts, prompting a deeper review of nonprofit operations, service providers, trade activities, and cross-border transfers. As data accumulated, patterns emerged showing how legitimate programs could be exploited through layered entities, shell companies, intermediaries, and rapidly shifting currencies. What appeared compliant on the surface often concealed deliberate fragmentation designed to obscure origin, destination, and accountability. Warehouses, offices, and logistical sites in several states were examined in parallel, yielding shipping manifests, internal ledgers, correspondence, and transaction histories that suggested coordination across industries, including distribution, commodities, real estate, and digital finance. Investigators described the operation as an illustration of modern financial crime, where scale and opacity replace force, and where reputations and institutions can be leveraged to enable misconduct over extended periods. Public reaction reflected understandable confusion and concern, particularly among communities that rely on assistance programs and trusted organizations for stability and support. Officials emphasized repeatedly that the inquiry focused on documented financial behavior, not identity, belief, or lawful advocacy, and that due process and transparency remain central to every step. As findings became public, the practical consequences of misused funds came into focus, revealing service interruptions, delayed payments, and reduced capacity for families and providers who depended on timely support. Investigators noted that harm in such cases rarely appears dramatic but accumulates quietly, measured in closed programs, lost opportunities, and eroded confidence. Legal proceedings advanced deliberately, shaped by evidence review, independent oversight, and coordination with partners across jurisdictions, while specialists continued tracing remaining assets through cooperative and non-cooperative channels alike. Authorities acknowledged openly that recovery in complex cases is partial and incremental, requiring persistence, international dialogue, and patience rather than spectacle. Throughout the process, safeguards were reinforced to prevent future misuse, including stronger auditing, clearer reporting, and improved coordination between agencies and administrators. By the investigation's early conclusion, the lakeside property stood sealed and silent, its stillness contrasting with the extensive documentation now under review. The case became a reminder that sophisticated wrongdoing often depends on ordinary systems functioning without scrutiny and that accountability requires sustained attention long after headlines fade. It also underscored the importance of protecting community trust while correcting structural weaknesses exposed by careful investigation. In the end, no single action defined the outcome, rather, it was the cumulative effect of methodical work, ethical restraint, and a commitment to fairness that allowed facts to emerge clearly. The frozen shoreline returned to quiet routines, yet the lessons remained active, shaping reforms, informing oversight, and reminding institutions that vigilance is not optional when public resources are entrusted to complex systems. As investigators continued their work beyond the initial phase, the broader goal stayed constant, ensuring that assistance reaches those it is meant to serve, that safeguards evolve with emerging risks, and that confidence can be rebuilt through openness and accountability. The story closed not with finality, but with a renewed understanding that systems are only as strong as the care taken to protect them, and that responsible governance depends on continuous review, shared responsibility, and public engagement. In reflecting on the events, observers noted how easily complexity can mask misuse and how essential it is to balance enforcement with compassion, accuracy with restraint, and accountability with respect. The investigation did not claim perfection, but it demonstrated how careful processes can correct course when vulnerabilities are identified. Long after the snow melted, records would still be examined, policies refined, and lessons applied, ensuring that the quiet winter morning marked not just an ending, but a commitment to integrity, stewardship, and the careful protection of public trust. This enduring focus affirmed that progress is built through diligence rather than drama, through facts rather than assumptions, and through systems designed to learn from scrutiny. While no investigation can undo every harm, thoughtful reform can reduce future risk and strengthen resilience across institutions. The final image was simple: a silent home, a frozen lake, and a community moving forward with clearer rules, stronger oversight, and a shared resolve to ensure that public resources are honored with care. In that resolve, the narrative found its meaning, not in accusation, but in responsibility, learning, and the ongoing work of maintaining trust in systems meant to serve everyone. By acknowledging limitations, valuing evidence, and improving cooperation, institutions can adapt without abandoning fairness. The narrative ultimately reinforces a principle often overlooked: prevention matters as much as response, and transparency strengthens legitimacy. When oversight is continuous, risks are detected earlier, impacts are reduced, and trust is preserved. Education, clear standards, and accountability form a practical defense against misuse of complex systems. In this sense, the investigation serves as a case study for administrators, auditors, and communities alike, illustrating how diligence can protect resources intended for public good. Moving forward, sustained attention will remain essential, ensuring lessons translate into practice, safeguards remain current, and confidence continues to grow. With that understanding, the story concludes as a reflection on responsibility rather than alarm, encouraging careful stewardship in every system that serves the public, today and tomorrow, through consistency, learning, and shared commitment. This closing perspective leaves space for progress, improvement, and cooperation, reminding viewers that trust is built deliberately, maintained collectively, and strengthened over